Autohaus 2020. I haven't done a solo episode in a while, but this week is going to be a solo episode. I'm going into my third month of running the Autohaus full time. If you guys don't know, I quit my day job December of last year, so I actually had like a relatively cushy government job. So I worked doing fleet vehicle maintenance for my county government, but I think personality wise, and then my vision for my life path for myself did not align with what my career was at the time, or what my current career path trajectory was. So if you guys want to hear more about that, please let me know. Yeah, it's been hectic. I mean, that's part of the reason why I'm doing solo podcast for the first time in a long time this week. A lot of factors, right? So the work I'm doing is becoming more specialized, and these cars are staying for a longer amount of time, or I should say these cars and these projects. So it used to be I'd have a car for like 2 weeks max, and I could like schedule with the owner of the car to podcast ahead of time. But now these projects, I mean, last December when I decided to quit my job, I had like 2-month-long Corolla, like heavy duty Corolla projects to do. And in my mind, I was like, dude, I can't work this job, or I can't work this day job. These cars and what I'm doing is what I care about. And these cars aren't going to get done with me, doing Autohaus in the day only, right? Or part-time only. But yeah, I made the leap. It's been 3 months. And yeah, super hectic. It feels like I've practically put in a year's worth of work into these few months. I mean, last week on Tuesday, like I came in Tuesday afternoon and I was like, dude, it feels like I've put in a week's work of work already. So these days, I'm essentially putting in triple duty every day. I run the Autohaus in the daytime during the night shift. So that's like, let's say 6:30 to 12 a.m. I'm assisting with annex suspension. And then after I go home, or when I can find time, that's my third job, is doing all the media work, right? So media work for Autohaus, annex, and then also, all associated media work. And although every day's been exhausting, it's like I've never been happier. It's definitely great to see projects move forward quickly, see things get implemented quickly, no bureaucracy, no, straight up no bullshit. And it's been great to see like physically, business has picked up for both Autohaus and annex, which has been there's small moments where I can see like I put the work in and it bears fruit for my efforts, right? Which is not always the case, but once in a while I'll get a glimpse of it. One of the reasons I wanted to do this podcast is kind of, even for myself, it's to kind of pause and reflect, because, as great as things have been, I'm like physically exhausted. And one of the hardest things for me to juggle right now is resource allocation. So what do I mean by resources? So one resource is my physical energy, working the long hours. I'm still doing physical work. Cash flow is another resource. Where am I going to allocate cash flow? Like I got personal bills to pay, but I would say majority of the cash flow I'm putting back into the business, back into the media work, trying to grow things for the future. And then a third big resource for me is like my mental focus, that allocating mentally where I should be putting my focus, because I'm pulled in so many directions by so many people. But yeah, let's talk about Corollas. So being neck deep in the Corolla culture and physically the business of it, I'm always, either online or physically out on the lookout, see what the market's doing, what are people doing, what are the trends. And it's rapidly changed, and it's continuing to change like a lot faster than I expected. So, one of the biggest changes I see is the trend towards restoration. Back when I started in the mid 2000s, these chassis were still throwaway drift cars, treated them as such, disposable chassis. And no matter what, people always complained about the price of things, which we'll get into later. One of the biggest markers I see towards the trend of restoration is in the aftermarket reproduction big ticket items. So, like bumpers, body panels. I think it's really reassuring, but it's also really insane that there's multiple companies making reproduction sheet metal for these low volume, like hyper niche cars. Or, not hyper niche, but, it's still a really niche market. Likewise, my personal clientele has skewed in this direction too, where it's like majority of the stuff I'm doing right now is not even resto mod. The car that's been at the shop for the past at least, I want to say it's been a month now. I haven't even had time to post pictures on Instagram of the car itself. It's the first time I'm talking about it. But yeah, this has been my longest running work order so far. And the owner, he'll regularly pay visits. I probably guarantee when he comes back to talk and check out his car, he's going to add one more thing to the list. And 99% of the stuff he's asking for is like restoration stuff. So all the keys or all the door lock cylinders I took out and had them rekeyed and rebuilt. There's a lot of like missing OEM stuff that's getting put back in or repaired. Taking out modifications or what previous owners of this car have done in the past and putting them back to factory. So very little modification, but a lot of this stuff is just getting this car back up to like modern OEM spec. And typical of a lot of like, that's another thing. I get a lot of cold calls now. And, but essentially like devoid of social, and I'll get a cold call from them. And it's always the same script, like, hey, I've had this car, it's been sitting, or hey, I just bought this car. I want a once over just so I can get this thing. Like, I want it like drive to be able to enjoy this car and have it streetable. I want you to see what it needs. These are my plans for the car. And I've heard through the grapevine, you're the guy to do this type of work. And a lot of times what the owner thinks is just like a little bit of work or a little bit of time ends up being like a full on, pretty much restoration. Like, I'll have a long list of items which I'll help the client like organize, like or I should say prioritize what needs to be done. So like, I'll put safety issues or number one, right? Drivability. And then there's stuff that can either upgrade or like update a car to modern spec. So the last one, what is an example of updating a car to modern spec? I might get a customer car that has some really old stuff on it, like really old suspension that may have been good back in the day. Or maybe they have bushings that were performance back in the day, but the car sat for so long, like it needs bushings or bearings serviced again. Or, same thing, old exhaust, where like, hey, this was the hot item back in the day, but there's a lot of stuff that's much better now in terms of like performance and longevity. We have a lot of volunteers or like help in the shop. And so, yeah, there's a common, I would say like a running joke in the shop. Like every time we get a Corolla here, someone in the shop will be like, what's this need? The Ezekiel special? But yeah, this work is definitely a plus and a minus. Focusing on these specialty vehicles. For one, it takes a huge amount of project management. So I'm talking like billing the correct labor hours. How do I even bill labor hours for this stuff? Sourcing stuff or sourcing parts that are discontinued, super hard to find, overseas only. Maybe these parts don't exist anymore. I have to make them from scratch, right? and then dealing with surprises on the car. So what is a surprise? All the modifications and air quotes goodies the previous owners of these vehicles have done. So give you some examples, like you'll see extra wires or wires hanging that's like, what is this thing tapped into? Why is this wire like bridging this? Why is these two pins in the check connector jumped? Why is all this stuff missing? What is this extra stuff? What is that extra relay for? I've also never had to use so much physical persuasion and finesse in working on cars in my entire career. So what do I mean by persuasion and finesse? So the welders and map gas come out regularly, and I've been running out of rust penetrant like I've never done before. So, give you an example. Last week, I decided to buy a whole gallon of PB Blaster. And how do you estimate labor time for a specialty vehicle? The short answer is you essentially can't. Typically, how labor time is estimated, if you work in at an independent or dealer, you'll go through a labor time guide. So like the dealer's OEM labor time guide, or another labor time guide, like All Data has a labor time guide, which will give you a guide to how many billable hours you should be charging per job. So for example, front brake pads and rotors, the estimated billable labor time will be 1 hour. But how do you do this for a specialty vehicle where there's surprises? There's things you don't think about that need to be factored in your own time, like sourcing parts or going through different distributors or avenues to find parts, find information. I think I have let's say 5 different service manuals for the AE86 now. So, one interesting manual I have digitally is an English manual that covers both the Australian and the US spec. And I needed that one because of the right-hand drive cars that came in. So there's stuff like clutch pedal height that I needed to confirm what is the clutch pedal height spec for a right-hand drive car. And there's a lot of right-hand drive or foreign market stuff I need to look up. Well, again, surprise, right? How are you looking up labor time for stuff that's specialty, foreign market, 30, 40 years old? So a lot of times it's, unfortunately, a guesstimation, right? So I can rely on past experience, but I'm definitely not the Corolla guru, or I haven't been around these cars like some other people for multiple decades. So a lot of the labor hours, I still have to guesstimate or gut feeling. So I'll typically take the base book labor time, and then I'll guesstimate does that sound right? What problems may I run into? What have I experienced in the past? It's really interesting in modern times, or I should say in 2020, with the age of these cars, there's a lot of stuff that is failing or starting to fail that people used to think were bulletproof, right? So two common failures I see a lot now is failed or beginning to fail throttle position sensors, and then also igniters, igniters is a rare failure, but I've had to replace 2 igniters now with brand new units. Again, going back to this big restoration project customer car that hasn't been on social so far. I'd love to document all the customer work I do on video, and I really know I should be, right? All this talk about me trying to do, be media company first and then repair facility second. But I think a big part of not documenting this stuff on video is because of the labor time and the surprises, and the fact that I'm doing this full time to make my living now. It's definitely a really big ask, right? You're fighting broken bolts and rusted stuff, and you're going to ask me to also bring out the camera and be in front and film things too. It's really tough. I really feel sometimes I'm fighting every job, fighting for time, and fighting for every dollar every time I do any sort of specialty work, which you guys probably already know is all the work I do. But going back to the state of the Corolla market, it's again been an interesting journey. Most recently on Facebook, you guys may have seen the restoration.jp, I think that's the company, is making reproduction Zenki bumpers, which there's people in SF planning to import them to California. Or I should say there's people planning to import them to SF already. And of course, being on Facebook, I saw the ensuing price complaint shit show, like always. But reading through some of the comments, I thought one good argument from someone was that no matter the price point on these bumpers, people are always going to complain. So they complained about used $1,000 bumpers, and then now that these restoration bumpers are $700 estimated, right? People still complaining. Kind of a related topic, AE86 Preservation Society. You should follow him on Instagram. I really applaud the work he's doing, trying to create reproduction interior kits for these cars. So like door panels, the seat covers, foam. It's really cool stuff. So make sure AE86 Preservation Society. Find him on Instagram. I had a long phone conversation with him one time, and he asked me like the state of the market, my experiences, and then like advice on him trying to get into the market with his product. And I'll tell you guys exactly what I told him. Is like, he said that he wanted an affordable product, but I told him that's not the way you should go about it. Again, for this same bumper thing, is like, no matter your price point, people are still going to complain about it, right? You post the price and the product on Facebook. Unfortunately, what'll happen is like, in the comments, you'll get a huge amount of demand, but in the end, when the product gets released, like, of those people, I would say very few will actually purchase. And then also, no matter what price point, always people are going to complain about the price, no matter what, right? But parallel with my business, doing like Corolla service work or Corolla restoration work, what usually ends up happening is exactly what's happening now. Is like cold call from these, random people. I should say people I have been like off the grid, off the radar, devoid of social, and those will be the ones that'll be like, hey, I want this done. I want this done right. I want my car back to where it should be, and I don't really care about price. I just want it done. And this sort of trend is where I see the market going right now. Is it's skewing higher income, older market, and towards past restomod into just straight restoration. I mean, we see this in just the pricing of these cars for sale, right? 5 figures for a California Corolla is not unusual, right? Multi 5 figures, 10, 20, 30,000, right? A lot of you guys probably know the shit show on Bring a Trailer with that multi 5 figure Corolla that ended up still having problems with it and still having payment issues. You can read that article yourself, but yeah, the market is fetching multi 5 figure prices for cars that still have issues. And I only see this trend continuing. And that's me viewing things from like, I guess the term is like from the ground floor, right? So yeah, I'd really like to know what you guys think, your opinions on like how have I been doing with the Autohaus, like physical work, media. I mean, all the feedback I can get, anything you guys want to see, because I mean, I'm here to cater the media work towards you guys. Again, I apologize for the solo episode. I mean, maybe you like solo episodes. Let me know. I try to ask and I don't get a lot of feedback, but I genuinely am trying to cater my media work towards you guys. Like, what do you guys want to hear? What do you guys want to hear? And then like, what do you guys want to hear more of, less of? Because right now, like the feedback is so few and far between. It's like a scatter shot of information, right? So I'm always surprised when like a podcast or like a video does well and like it feels like it's out of the blue. So lastly, I want to give a really special thanks to the people who have supported me on Patreon thus far. So it's the middle of March. My current Patreon supporters: Eric Teddy, Cesar Moreno, Lance Carmichael, Evan D'Angelo, Max Pham, Casey Abbott, Greg Schultz, and Alan Tang. Thank you guys so much for supporting me and believing in me. Like, I think more than anything, it's like a big boost in morale for me. I remember specifically night I quit my job. I think, Eric Teddy was my first Patreon supporter. And then someone also bought stickers off the web store. I remember quitting my job, coming back to the shop because I quit and started and packed up in the same night. And I remember the drive over, like the sinking feeling in my stomach, like, what have I done? But, a big boost in morale was seeing, Eric getting on the Patreon and then also the sticker sales. And I was like, okay, I'm on the right track. I mean, so like, thank you guys again. Also, thank you to anyone and everyone else that has supported me. Even if you just watch my videos, like my videos, listen to the podcast, especially if you leave a review for the podcast, like anyone who's out there supporting me, I really appreciate it. Because, I'm definitely out here, doing my best and putting the work in to help build and spread the culture. My goal is to keep the AE86 chassis physically and culturally alive and running. And all you guys definitely help me out a ton by having faith in me. Yeah, as you guys have noticed, which I've talked about in my one YouTube video, I'm short one podcast a month. And again, producing podcasts and has been tougher as, finding guests, finding time to physically schedule guests and actually record, cut and edit and print the podcast. Yeah, it's been tough and I apologize. But part of that is I am currently producing 2 other podcasts. So make sure to check those 2 out. The Annex Suspension podcast, if you'd like to learn about the dark art of suspension and find out about Annex Suspension, the company, or if you want just like a good entertaining technical listen. And then the other podcast I'm producing for the gold AE86 that was just at SEMA, the infamous 100K Corolla. The podcast is called Rico's Way. And so this podcast is the owner, Rico, telling his story about building cars, how he got to where he's at, the stories and lessons he's learned along the way to get to where he's at now. And again, the stories and lessons that he continues to learn. So both of those produced by myself, and then both of those like great listen also. Annex Suspension podcast and Rico's Way. That's the end of this week's episode. I apologize again for it being a solo episode, but if you like the solo episodes, let me know. Maybe I'll make more. I'll probably have to make more because of time constraints, but thank you guys so much again. And, I can't reiterate enough. Let me know what you guys want to hear on the podcast and see from my media work, and I will do my best to deliver. So, until next time. Thanks again, you guys.